That helped lay the groundwork, all those hard-fought victories that led to our finals nationwide success for marriage equality. Being at the Supreme Court when we finally achieved marriage equality for every loving couple was a thrill that I will never forget. Unfortunately, not every campaign is successful. Like you, I was really excited about the prospect of electing our first woman president. I was very proud of our Ms. President Now campaign and all the Now leaders that stepped forward to be coordinators and all the activists that worked and phoned into nearly every state to help with that campaign. Hillary and her campaign were very grateful for all of the work that Now did. The loss was devastating for all of us. We didn't break the glass ceiling this time, but I am confident that one day we will. And in the wake of that loss was the Women's March, and what a march that was. How many of you participated? Of course, almost the entire room. Awesome. Organizing Now's visibility at the giant Women's March on Washington was an incredibly exhilarating experience, especially knowing that many Now members were in DC as well as in their states and in their communities, declaring that women's rights are human rights and we'll all stand together and resist. You did awesome with that. After 8 years, I'm a little sad as I leave office, but I'm excited as we elect new officers and chart the course to meet the new challenges that are coming at us like a tsunami. But I know that Now is strong, our grassroots have the skills and the passion to succeed. When things look tough ahead, I like to reread the end of the 1998 Declaration of Sentiments from Now's Vision Conference. Here it is. Even when progress seems most elusive, we will maintain our conviction that the work itself is important, for it is the work that enriches our lives. It is the work that unites us. It is the work that will propel us into the next century. We know that our struggle has made a difference, and we affirm our faith that it will continue to make a difference for women's lives. Today, we dedicate ourselves to the sheer joy of moving forward and fighting back. So I want to thank you again for this wonderful opportunity. Bonnie, out.
Bonnie, I am thrilled to give you an award for all of your work, all of your passion, all of your energy. And truly, do you know that this woman has been an activist member of Now for 36 years?
Is that long?
That's what somebody told me.
Yeah.
And she has come through this organization. First, she was DuPage County Now president in Illinois. Then she was the PAC director, the PAC chair of Illinois Now. She was the state president of Illinois Now. She was on the board, the national board. You have been the action vice president nationally, the executive president nationally, and the vice president nationally. Now, what did she do in all that time? I think the appropriate theme for you is, on job descriptions, the last line is to perform such other duties and responsibilities not defined.
Yeah, that's about it.
And I think that is really what should be on this award.
Oh, yeah, they put it on there. Other duties as assigned. I don't know how we'd get the printer paper without that
We'll
line.
do it. We'll write it on. Because in Illinois, I think this is the first time, my memory, the first time we worked together was defending the abortion clinics in Illinois. And that's quite a number of years ago. You went on to be very active, very, very key in the election of Carol Moseley Braun as the first African-American U.S. Senator. And I know you and your buddy Gay over there worked very hard on that. And Carol is still active, and she's an advisory member of NOW. Once you became the vice president, just to give an idea of when I say she did all the duties not defined, you supervised the government relations. You supervised chapter services. You supervised the political work. You supervised the action campaigns. Is this not true?
This is
Not only was she active on marriage equality in Illinois in a very leading way, but she put in to the criteria of NOW PAC that anybody endorsed had to support marriage equality.
Thanks for remembering that.
So not only was she active on the mass level, but also on the individual level. And in the action campaigns, you mentioned, and you did very hard work on the Ms. President Now work, and again with your buddy Gay. And on the Now March, I saw you on the January 21st march. I saw you as you were running around getting signs and posters and sign-ups up, and did a terrific job.
Thank you.
So, in summary, I would just say that I think that this really represents Bonnie, the Jill of all trades.
Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much. That was so wonderful.
Thank you, Alice Cohan, a longtime leader, not only in NOW, but also in the Feminist Majority Foundation. Thank you so much, Alice, and indeed, thank you, Bonnie, for all your service. Before I start my remarks, I would like us to just take a moment, a moment of silence, please, for the memory and families of Philando Castile, brutally shot and killed outside St. Paul, Minneapolis, as he sat in the passenger seat of his car, and his 4-year-old stepdaughter watched helplessly. A moment of silence for Charlene Lyles, a pregnant woman shot and killed by police in Seattle, Washington, as her children were in the apartment with her, a woman with mental illness, who the police department knew had mental illness issues, and they shot and killed her. I would also like to take this time of a moment of silence for the 49 victims of the Pulse nightclub massacre, their memory and their families, if we could. and thank you. Now, I do want to start off by saying a bunch of thank yous. First of all, thank you to the extraordinary group of feminists that I have had the opportunity to work with over the past 8 years. To the members of the National Board, if you're a member of the National Board, please raise your hand. You are volunteer activists. You have put in, and this board has put in untold hours developing and implementing NOW's National Action Program, meeting monthly with our action team, reviewing, commenting on, always improving the action campaign materials that we have produced. Thank you so much for being such extraordinary colleagues with us. To the Board Advisory Committee, Ambassador Carol Mosley-Braun, Dr. Janet Canterbury, Patricia Ireland, and Deli Smeal. Without your extraordinary support, advice, mentoring, chastisement, often earned, rarely believed to be earned in the moment. Honestly, it's because of my advisors' generosity that they took with their time and their wisdom. And they always, always, always look out for the best interest of the organization. And we are all in your debt, so thank you. Thank you to Vice President Bonnie Grabenhofer, who has always been so diligent and so wonderfully detail-oriented in addressing every task before her. I really appreciate your service, Bonnie. And thank you to the staff, the very small staff at the National Action Center, for your dedication, your willingness to work nights and weekends to accommodate the schedules of our volunteer leaders around the country. And especially I want to thank my staff for their professionalism. I am so proud to have worked with each and every one of you. And thank you to my family, especially to my daughter Sarah, who is here this afternoon, and my brother Andy and his family, my sister-in-law Terry, my niece Lauren, my nephew Michael. Thank you all so much. Thank you for your extraordinary patience. As I missed so many family gatherings, I fell out of contact with too many of you. And thank you for always telling me that you would be there for me, no matter how outlandishly, ridiculously leftist you found my politics to be. I will always appreciate you, and I promise you, I will never stop telling you I'm right on every issue. I'm looking at you, Andy. And most of all, to every person in this room, you represent NOW's thousands of grassroots activists working tirelessly for women's equality. We are here today only because of your work and your support. I am humbled every day by your fierce dedication, and from the bottom of my heart, I thank you for all that you do. So please give yourselves a hand. So what I want to talk about today is what we're facing as feminist grassroots organizers, right? As a women's movement, as a progressive movement. What it is that we need to do, and can we really have any hope of overcoming the terrible threats that we face right now, right? Because our political reality today is going to require every ounce of fierce dedication that we have. We know Donald Trump is not our only problem. House Speaker Paul Ryan is the prime mover behind TrumpCare. He's determined to throw tens of millions off their health insurance in order to give nearly $1 trillion tax break to billionaires and corporations. That's not Trump, that's Paul Ryan. Senate Majority Mitch McConnell, he's the architect of the outrageous theft of Merrick Garland's Supreme Court seat to install Neil Gorsuch. And make no mistake, Neil Gorsuch's views are, if anything, more racist, more misogynist, more homophobic, and more transphobic than his predecessor, Antonin Scalia. To be clear, Trump and Ryan and McConnell would not be such threats without the support of Republican rank-and-file lawmakers who dutifully fall in line behind everything that's demanded of them. I offer you Exhibit A, the repeal of the Affordable Care Act. 217 Republican members of the House of Representatives voted to repeal the Affordable Care Act and replace it with Trump Care. Now, in both the House and the Senate, the key features of Trump Care are tens of millions of people thrown off their health insurance, Medicaid decimated, $880 billion taken out of Medicaid, women on Medicaid forbidden to use Planned Parenthood for their reproductive health care, insurers allowed to price people out of the insurance market if they have a pre-existing condition, insurers allowed to consider sexual assault, domestic violence, even having a C-section delivery as a pre-existing condition. Women of color, especially devastated by this evil law. For black women who already experience high maternal death rates, more than 3 times higher than white women, this bill will be devastating. And get this, the Senate version of Trump Care revives insulting and demeaning stereotypes about women of color that stretch all the way back to the Reagan years of the myth of the welfare queen. Under the Senate version, Medicaid eligibility requires that you have to have a job or you get kicked off the Medicaid rolls, and women on Medicaid would be thrown off the rolls if they don't go back to work within 2 weeks of giving birth. How dare they? And what is all this for? That's for hundreds of billions of dollars in tax cuts for billionaires and corporations. Rank-and-file Republicans, not just McConnell, not just Ryan, not just Trump, rank-and-file Republican lawmakers. And none of that would be possible without billionaire funders like the Koch brothers engineering the voter suppression and gerrymandering that helps keep those people in power. Thank you. And let's face it, there is another dire challenge we face today, and that would be voters. And specifically, the white voters who put these extremists in power in the United States Congress and in the White House. 63% of white men, 80% of white evangelical Christians, 53% of white women cast their ballot for Donald Trump. 53% of women who look like me, of women who look like most of the women in this room. Now, the important piece about that, I think, is the contrast. The contrast. 94% of African American women, 94% of African American women, over 2/3 of Latinas and Asian American women, well over 2/3 of American Indian women voted for Hillary Clinton. Our sisters of color voted overwhelmingly for someone who did not look like them. Someone whose life experience may have been in many ways completely different from their own. Our sisters of color did not vote their identity. They voted their progressive, inclusive, feminist values. At every income level, at every level of higher education, our sisters of color voted for progressive feminist values, but only 43% of white women voters could see their way clear to doing so. That is a reality that those of us, and by the way, those of us who are proudly in the 43%, can I get a 43%? Honestly, those of us in the 43%, we must address this disaster. It's on us. Now, I don't pretend to have all the answers on how we can address this problem. I can give you an example of what would not work. So I have a friend who said, you know, I frequently see so-and-so, and she's a friend of mine, and it turns out she voted for Trump, and I just can't be in the same room with her because I just want to scratch her eyes out. That is not the way forward. I'm pretty sure that's still illegal in most states. So you probably don't want to do that. What we really need to do, actually, is let's start out by heeding the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. when he said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." And then we need to think about what then Senator Barack Obama said. You know, here's the thing, he said. The arc of the moral universe does not bend on its own. It bends because each of us reaches up and pulls it in the direction of justice. Right? So how do we pull the moral universe towards justice? How do we move forward? How do we link arms together? All of us, we're so deeply dedicated to real equality, to women's rights as human rights, for all women in all communities in this country. So I don't have all the answers, but I will tell you, I have some good news.
Run, you're going to run for office?
I am already working to elect some amazing women, including Hala Ayala in Virginia. That's one thing I'm totally doing. You know, for the 8 years prior to the 2016 election, we had been making progress. It wasn't perfect. I'm the first to say it wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And the progress we made in those 8 years, that is serving as our platform from which we are building and launching a fierce, powerful, passionate resistance. So what I want to do is take a few minutes to talk about some of the progress we've made over the last 8 years, some of which I'm proud to have been a part of. The Lilly Ledbetter Act restored women's ability to enforce their rights to equal pay for equal work after the Supreme Court had gutted that right in the infamous case of Ledbetter versus Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. This was the first piece of legislation that President Barack Obama signed into law. That was a good win. Marriage equality. In 2015, the Supreme Court's decision in Obergefell v. Hodges recognized the constitutional right of same-sex couples to marry. Just 8 years ago, only a handful of states allowed same-sex couples to marry. President Obama had not yet declared his support for it, but now marriage equality is the law of the land. And winning the right of same-sex couples to marry gives us a strong and powerful platform, because that decision was accompanied by a sea change in public attitudes about the LGBTQIA+ community, right? A strong majority of people in this country believe in the full humanity and the human rights of LGBTQIA+ people. So Trump and his enablers in Congress and in state legislatures, they can push to roll back the gains we've made, but we will be standing in solidarity with our LGBTQIA+ sisters and brothers and siblings, fighting for protection from workplace discrimination, from housing discrimination, for the right of every transgender student to use the bathroom that corresponds with their gender identity. We will not accept any rollbacks. We will build on the gains we've made and fight for nothing less than full equality under the law. Yeah. We also scored another big win in the Supreme Court case of Whole Woman's Health v. Hellerstedt, right? Which struck down the infamous Texas TRAP law. TRAP standing for Targeted Regulation of Abortion Providers. This was a law designed to force safe, legal, medically appropriate abortion providers out of business by imposing impossible, ridiculous, costly requirements on them. The Supreme Court ruled unequivocally that, as follows, medical regulations that single out abortion providers and do nothing to advance women's health or their health outcomes, right? But do make it harder for women to access reproductive health care services, that's unconstitutional. That's what the Supreme Court said. And And our allies, with now as signing on, we are already going into other states using the Hellerstedt decision to strike down other similar type clinic shutdown laws. We also succeeded in passing the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act, and that was harder than it should have been. But in the end, we did pass the reauthorization with significant improvements, right, for immigrant women, for women who live on American Indian reservations, and for LGBTQIA plus survivors of intimate partner violence. That was a good win. Perhaps the most far-reaching progress that we've actually made in the past 8 years was adding over 20 million people to the health insurance rolls thanks to the Affordable Care Act. So 8 years ago, in the summer of 2009, Washington, D.C. was embroiled in the fight to pass comprehensive health care reform, and now was fighting to make sure that health care included full access to the full range of reproductive health care, including abortion and birth control. And let's be clear about why that is so important. 1 in 3 of us, 1 in 3 women will have an abortion by the age of 45. It is a common and necessary aspect of our basic reproductive health care needs, right? Now, my last name is O'Neill, right? I'm not a practicing Catholic, but I do know that according to Catholic doctrine, vasectomy is a sin no less than abortion is. It's a mortal sin. And taking Viagra for purposes other than procreation, also a sin. But do you see the Catholic bishops going up and down the halls of Congress demanding restriction and regulation and criminalization of vasectomy or the use of Viagra? No, you do not. Religion has nothing to do with singling out abortion care. Only women's sinful reproductive health care and not men's sinful reproductive health care. That's not about religion. That's sex discrimination, plain and simple. Immoral, unconstitutional, and we will not stand for it. Right. Now and its allies scored a really big win in the Affordable Care Act fight with the introduction of Senator Barbara Mikulski's Women's Health Amendment, my senator from Maryland. That one passed, and it requires women's preventive care like birth control and mammograms and cervical cancer screenings and lactation training and assistance. All of that has to be included as standard coverage in every health insurance plan, right? It revolutionized, especially having birth control available without copays or deductibles, has revolutionized women's access to reproductive health care, women's health outcomes, and it has saved literally billions of dollars for women around the country. And in addition to the Mikulski Amendment, the expansion of Medicaid has enabled tens of millions of women to have health insurance for the very first time in their adult lives, right? The Affordable Care Act also prohibits insurers from denying coverage or charging more for pre-existing conditions. And the act also prohibits insurers from charging women higher premiums than men for exactly the same insurance plan. That was a practice called gender rating, and it is illegal under the Affordable Care Act. So the ACA is not perfect, right? Perfect would be single-payer health care with all aspects of women's health, including reproductive health services, fully covered. And we don't have that right now, but the ACA has been successful enough that a large majority of people in this country are now able to experience in their personal lives that it's possible to have health care coverage that is meaningful and affordable and covers a standardized set of essential health benefits. That's enormous. That, as then Vice President Joe Biden said, that is a big effing deal. And that's the foundation on which we've been able, so far at least, to stop Trump care. You know, with the Congress totally in control of Republicans, with Donald Trump in the White House, we should have lost Trump care months ago. It is almost July, and we still have we should have lost the ACA and gotten Trump care months ago. But it's almost July, and we still have the ACA. That is absolutely amazing, and it's because the ACA works well enough, and it is supported by the vast majority of people in this country, right? Now, we're in the midst of this battle right now in the Senate. Right? They had to postpone the vote. They wanted to vote this past week. They had to postpone the vote until after the July 4th recess. But Mitch McConnell plans for them to come roaring back and pass it as soon as the July 4th recess is over, just like happened in the House. Right? So every day, everyone in this room needs to be calling both of their senators, whether they're Democrats or Republicans. Call them. It matters. The Democrats need to be able to say to their Republican colleagues, oh my God, I'm getting all these calls. Are you getting calls? They need to hear from us every single day. Today, I know everybody is busy today, but today you'll have some free time. Okay, so first when you have your free time, go to the exhibit tables. They want to show you show you their wares and so forth, all right? But then call both of your senators. Email them. When you get home after this conference, go see them in their district offices and bring 5 friends with you. Stop at the exhibit table of the National Action Program, and they'll give you some really good hints, tips, and tricks for how to do that. It's fun. And you know what? Don't feel sorry for your senators when they say, yeah, we've heard from you so many times. That's their job. That's why they get paid the big bucks, right? Now, we need to also celebrate Hillary Clinton's candidacy for President of the United States. Hillary ran an unapologetically feminist campaign. She was the first presidential candidate in history to defend access to abortion care on a national debate stage. So she connected the dots between sexism and racism and homophobia and economic inequality. She presented an unflinching progressive agenda, and a majority of people of the United States voted for it by a margin of 3 million votes. Now, the fact that she did not win the Electoral College was heartbreaking, but her candidacy alone has paved the way for more and more women to step up and run for office, right? Hillary herself said it best, when on the day after. She said, quote, "I know we have still not shattered that highest and hardest glass ceiling, but someday someone will, and hopefully sooner than we might think right now." In fact, this past Tuesday, Hillary Clinton announced that more than 15,000 women have contacted Emily's List expressing interest in running for office, and 7,000 more want to work in their campaigns and help them win. And I'm hoping that in this room, we've got a lot of those 15,000 and 7,000 women. So the lesson I take away from Hillary Clinton's candidacy is that even when you don't win, you pick yourself up. Even when you don't win, you win. Because you pick yourself up. You take an honest look at what worked and what didn't work. You move forward. And then you look around yourself, and what do you see? 15,000 more women who are doing the very same thing, putting themselves on the line to lead and be the future of our country. That's not nothing. Finally, if you want proof that we have a way forward, just look at what happened on January 21st of this year. The Women's March on Washington brought 5 million people worldwide to the streets to proclaim that although Donald Trump may be in the White House, women's rights are human rights, and human rights are women's rights. Crowd estimate experts say that in Washington, D.C., the Women's March crowd was about 3 times the size of Trump's inauguration crowd. And yes, Donald, sometimes size does matter, ha ha ha. We may not have the power in Washington right now, but we have the people. with us. And with the new extraordinary influx of engaged women and men, we will rededicate ourselves more fiercely than ever before to the inclusive, intersectional, feminist vision that inspired the creation of the National Organization for Women in the first place. You know, NOW's purpose today, inscribed in our bylaws, is to take action through intersectional grassroots activism to promote feminist ideals and lead societal change. That's why each national action campaign in our National Action Program, which the board is going to present to you tomorrow morning on Sunday, each campaign is intentionally and thoughtfully intersectional. And I gotta tell you, intersectional grassroots activism is not complicated. It's not complicated. All you have to do is look to the margins. Take any policy, any given policy, look to the margins and ask yourself, how does this policy impact people and communities who have been marginalized? Then shape that policy for the needs and well-being of the marginalized community. That's all it is. That's all intersectionality is. And I'll give you an example. NOW's campaign to ratify the ERA is deliberately intersectional. We insist that the Equal Rights Amendment to the Constitution must be for all of the women in our country's many diverse communities, because where a white woman may face discrimination because she is a woman, African American women and Latinas and women with disabilities, and lesbians, and bisexual women, and transgender men. People who do not have my race privilege, right? People who don't have my class privilege, my education privilege, when they face discrimination, it is never, and we white women need to wrap our brains around this very clearly, it is never simply because they are women. And in that way, their experience is quite different from ours. It is always also because of their race or ethnicity or language or religion or their sexuality or gender expression or their ability. We fight in NOW for an ERA that is for all of our sisters, and we never apologize for that. One more example. The National Action Program also includes a campaign for voting rights as a women's issue. Right? You know, most people think of voting rights as a quote-unquote civil rights issue, like siloed off from women's rights. But at NOW, we're making a case for putting the gender lens on voting rights. Because it turns out, when you look at voter suppression measures, mostly targeted at communities of color, look to the women in those communities of color, and what you find is they are disproportionately impacted by those voter suppression laws. Strict voter ID laws, it's women who change our names when we get married. And right? And then the birth certificate doesn't match the name on your lease or on your mortgage, and you have to get all the documentation to figure it out. You got your birth certificate, your marriage certificate, your divorce certificate, we don't judge, your remarriage certificate. You have to, it is disproportionately harmful to our sisters of color in those targeted communities of color. What about restricting voting days? Right? 2/3 of minimum wage workers in this country are women, and they are disproportionately women of color. The minimum wage in this country today is at $7.25. It is a sub-starvation wage, and many women have to work 2 jobs, and they don't get time off, not even unpaid time off, to go vote. They need extremely flexible voting hours, voting on weekends, many weekends leading up to Election Day, voting on evenings. You restrict that, you stop women of color from being able to vote. And need I remind you, 94% of our sisters of color, African American sisters, voted for progressive, intersectional, inclusive, feminist policies. So just taking the time and taking the effort to ask the question, how does this policy affect people on the margins? Understanding how the combination of race and gender creates hurdles for voting, for example, that white women will never experience, but our sisters of color do. That's how intersectionality works. And honestly, once you get used to it, once you develop that habit of mind, to look to the margins, it really becomes pretty easy. But you have to have the political willingness to develop that habit of mind. And that is what I'm challenging everyone in this room to do. That is what our bylaws requires us to do. Intersectional grassroots organizing. Look to the margins. We stand arm in arm with our sisters of color and our LGBTQIA plus sisters and siblings. We stand arm in arm because we are intersectional in that way. Okay. Now, since the 2016 election, I actually personally, I have returned again and again to Martin Niemöller's famous poem. Written in the years following World War II, there's actually quite a few versions of this poem, but the one memorialized in the United States Holocaust Museum reads as follows. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. I think we all hear echoes of today's tyranny, of yesterday's tyranny in today's extremism. Niemöller's poem paints a pretty dark picture of what happens when we fail to look beyond ourselves and our own personal experiences. But I read his poem as something greater than that as well. I read it as also a call to action. This is our call to look beyond ourselves, to speak up for one another, to be in solidarity with each other and for each other, to leave no one behind, because we are stronger together. We are stronger today than we were 8 years ago, and our numbers are growing. I have been so privileged and honored to be a part of this great organization. And while I am stepping down as president, I am a lifetime member, and I will always be part of NOW. And I can promise you this. At NOW, we won't go back. We will fight back. 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 We are not backing down. We are rising together. Thank you all so much. Thank you very, very much. I didn't know about this.
I
No.
know.
Yeah.
Neither Terry or Bonnie knew about this part.
Oh yeah. Oh, Mike. I took. Yeah. Right. So. Oh, here.
Okay. Neither Terry or Bonnie knew about this part, but we want the National Organization for Women, the whole group, wants to thank you in the deepest of ways for your leadership. And I was given the privilege of presenting the award to you. God knows I know how tough it is to be president of NOW. And Terry just went through a lot that happened under her 8 years, but she left out a few parts that are sort of boring, but I think should be, I mean, it's not the issues, but it's what makes the organization tick. When she came in, there wasn't any reserve. She is leaving the next set of officers $1 million plus in the bank. $2 million. $2 million in the bank. $2 million. This was a $1 million that came in now, but $2 million in the bank, which is a wonderful achievement and is going to set off the next 8 years, make it a heck of a lot easier. And I know how hard it is to raise that kind of money and how disciplined you must be to create a reserve so that you can take chances in difficult times. We really haven't, as an organization, I don't think we've ever had a reserve this big.
But I mean, because we tend to spend every last dime, we don't want to. But anyway, I think it's wonderful. And we added membership every year, and we're in the position now of adding membership. Right. And that also doesn't just happen. Yes, we just had this awful occurrence, and there's been a backlash to Trump, but it doesn't magically come in. You have to plan the mailings. You have to plan the emails. You have to meet with God knows how many people to make sure it all goes out the door at the right time. And so she got it out the door at the right time, and that's why you see that membership soaring. Now, not only did she do that, but she also helped us nationally by getting on television a lot. Yeah. And that isn't just easy either. And made sure that you hired a decent, first-rate PR firm. Yes, exactly. And got on Ed Schultz's, program and Reverend Sharpton's program, and that also made the membership soar. And days that weren't good days, because remember, this started during a recession. Remember, she comes in 2009, that we are in a deep recession. Let's not forget that. To build money up, even in those times, is, believe me, hard. Yeah, I'm sorry. But everything she did with passion, and I think you made it look pretty damn easy. And that passion that you just heard is in everything she does. Other little details, but I'm even surprised at the biography. Of course, she graduated magna cum laude from Tulane and law school, and it was a great thing that she went to New Orleans, because some of that passion was built in New Orleans. Yes. Because when she started there, David Duke was on the rise. Yep. Yes. And she couldn't stand it that he was going to be governor or something of Louisiana. So you joined now, yep. And you got active, yep. Despite the fact that she was now beginning a career in a place that you can tell from her accent. She doesn't really come from there. But she led that she helped to lead a civil rights outrage that led to, I love the bumper sticker. What was that bumper sticker?
Well, David Duke's opponent was a man named Edwin Edwards. He had previously served as governor of Louisiana. And so at the time of this election, he was under federal investigation for public corruption. And the bumper sticker said, "Vote for the crook. It's important."
Right? That passion has been there every year. And in fact, she went from Louisiana. I don't know if anybody else has done this, by the way. She becomes president of New Orleans now, then president of Louisiana now, then Mid-South board member of National now. And then she runs for national vice president with Ken Gandy, also our esteemed former president who was from Louisiana, and comes north again and starts all over again, because after she was president for 4 years, she leaves the national position and starts again as president of Maryland now.
Right, yeah.
I mean, in the meantime, she became executive director of the National Council of Women's Organizations, then went from that to being a board member from the Mid-Atlantic, and then national president. So you've served this organization in leadership positions in the South, in the Mid-Atlantic. She's been there, and there's one thing I know for sure. She will continue to be there for us. I have no doubt that she will continue to serve. In fact, right now, I mean, she takes a lot of unsung hero things. She's treasurer of the National Council of Women's Organizations and is helping us there, too.
Yes, right.
I mean, and one thing she said to me, and as she said to so many, I'm not leaving the women's movement. This is just the beginning. This is the tough part, and she will be there serving for us. Thank you so much, and thank you for the organization. And it's a token. This is just a token of our thank you for 22 years of commitment to the National Organization for Women. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, photo op. I got it.
Photo op.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, here we go.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks, Ellie.
Oh, here's it.
Oh, thanks. So we are actually, we started about 15 minutes late, and it is now 4:45, so we're kind of on time. We got the timing right. Anyway, it's time to vote. It is time to do the official leadership transition of the National Organization for Women. Go vote, then go to the PAC party and spend money. We have lots of fun things to do to raise money for the PAC. Thank you all so much. I do not. Go out to the, I guess, go out there. Somebody out there knows where the PAC party is. You think that's right?